Perfect. Great. So I'm Austin Regneri, product designer here at GitLab. This week, I wanted to cover in the UX Showcase a very low fidelity version of what I have going on right now, specifically around an issue that I've been collaborating on with product management early in the process. One thing that I see a lot of times in our UX showcases is like this complete story. And I just wanted to jump in and show something that's not complete yet, and we're still iterating through an idea towards a solution. Something that I've been trying to adjust to as I work more with my product manager is how issues end up in workflow design. So a few months ago, Matt, my product manager, opened up an issue with the intent of adding a widget to a dashboard, a very solution-heavy driven idea. And all great ideas usually come from some sort of solution, which is totally fine. But one thing that I've been trying to encourage myself to do more is get into the problem validation step, help refine the problem so that we have a better defined outcome for what we want to achieve through design and solution validation. So I'm going to kind of walk through this issue a little bit, show some context of where the changes were suggested and how we're going to try and move forward with it. So like I was saying, Matt initially created this issue. It was called Add Credential Inventory Widget to Admin Dashboard. I'm going to lean on some of our features here in the issue to show what it used to be like. It was essentially saying like, hey, let's just do this thing to increase our monthly active users by adding a widget to the dashboard. At face value, like, yeah, pretty easy. I'll just design this like screen with a couple statistics and then we'll be good to go, right? And Matt was kind enough to add a few mockups, which I love when product managers share their ideas visually. It helps communicate what they're thinking. And so his initial idea was like, hey, let's just add this thing to the dashboard, which if you compare that to what the admin area looks like now, it probably would appear something more towards the bottom. So that led me to thinking, okay, well, why? Why are we trying to do this thing? And I could see that the intent was to drive this increase around our GMAU, the group monthly active users, which is great, good goal for us to go after. But I didn't truly understand how this was solving for that problem. So as I was talking through it with Matt, I'm just trying to ask more about like, why are we doing this? What's the value in it? And trying to understand where he's coming from, because he might be hearing things from our customers or from different individuals that match our persona, primarily Cameron, the compliance manager, that I don't necessarily have the context of. So what he was leading me down the path of understanding is that we have this credential inventory section in our admin dashboard, and we're not seeing a lot of attraction in terms of users just driving to it as like a main component for their workflow. And so as I was asking these questions, I was trying to hint to Matt, like, yeah, I could give you all these solution ideas. So I teased a few like simple solutions that we could consider as alternatives to the ones that he was presenting. Like we could introduce a counter to the credentials. We could add more, information to the credentials inventory itself and provide those counters there, or even introduce this widget in the compliance dashboard. We don't exactly know what solution is the best one just yet. So what we were trying to do was to go back and focus on what is the problem we're truly trying to solve at this point, so that we can go and find some way to validate that to better inform our design decisions. It's very easy just to jump to the design that we want, as opposed to going and validating, is this truly solving the problem? And Mike was kind enough to also help reinforce that prospect. And so from there, we continued refining it together. We had a couple iterations that we went through. I primarily brought in things like the jobs to be done statements. I tried to refine the proposal in a way that focused more on the outcome. And so then what we're left with are a couple things. We've outlined how we're going to try and solve a problem for both the customer, but also solve like for a business outcome for GitLab. So we want to see that increase in monthly users, but we also want to help make Cameron's job easier so that there's incentive to actually use whatever change we're implementing into the product. It's kind of obvious that there's a lot of additions to GitLab, which creates a lot of noise, and I don't want to just continue adding to GitLab frivolously. I want to try and make it more intentional. So now we have a much more refined problem. We have mapped it to some job that we think matches Cameron's expectations. And then we have a few ideas for solutions that we could use to help better inform how these might solve the problem that we're trying to solve. So we took some of those screenshots from the ideas that we had, and we can take those into design and diverge a bit on solutions to figure out what makes the most sense And then to kind of summarize that all together, it gives us the opportunity to also better define the outcomes we'd like to see. So in terms of measurements, how do we know we're successful? I think that's something that we often forget to do or forget to define before we start building. And I think by defining the problem up front, matched with the jobs, we'll be able to do that. If you have any feedback for me on how I could do this better or what you think would be a good addition, please let me know. I'm still trying to figure out these things myself. And that's it. Any questions?
I have a comment.
Sure.
Actually, I have a few comments. So let me start by saying, hey, I love that you just talked us through your issue. That was great. Heck yes, you got me really excited. What a fabulous example of taking things back to the problem, which, to your point, it's so instinctive when you see a solution just to go, oh, okay, I've got a request for a solution and here we go, and we're just gonna go. You didn't do that. You really thought this through. And I love that you're thinking about the complexity of our product, because that is one of the biggest customer pain points that we hear about. We should all be thinking about how can we support users' needs without adding cruft and clutter. So my comments are just a big yes. Wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback, Christy. Yeah, it was fun to continue to refine it and defining it as opposed to saying, let's make a widget to let's focus on increasing discoverability of this feature, I think will lead to that outcome. I hope. Fingers crossed.
Justin, would you like to voice your comment?
Yeah, and it's backing up what Christy was saying. I totally agree. And I think it's a great reminder on how important it is for us as UX people to be constantly aware of the why and ensuring that we're asking that and we're making sure that we're solving the problem. I am curious, what was your PM's reaction to your follow-ups and your whys?
Yeah, and I think Matt's openness to conversation is reinforced, and I really have appreciated his willingness to continue refining things and not even just take what I say at face value, because I think that leads to some of the best ideas. He's very great about reinforcing that he really appreciates my thought partnership, and he continues to help push things. So even after I made a revision, Matt made another revision, and so we just continued building on each other's ideas. So it was a pretty good collaboration effort between the two of us.
Nice.
And Valerie, I think you have a comment as well.
Yeah, this is great, by the way. So do you have any suggestions for a designer wanting to try this out for the first time with their PM? Did you have initial conversations with your PM before you tried this, or did you just go straight into the tool and give it a try? And then my second question is kind of an add-on to that. Is there anything that designers should watch out for, anything that you ran into that they might run into that they need to be aware of in advance?
Yeah. Okay. So two-parter. How did I know I was ready to have this conversation, I guess, or trying to approach it in this way? And then the second part being anything to look out for. So with the first one, I've always tried to keep a pretty open perspective in terms of how I approach my conversations with product management. That's both before I came to GitLab and since I've come here. And it starts by, I went through the DIB training recently. So it starts by trying to be open-minded and asking questions, and comes from a point of trying to understand first. So I wasn't initially trying to shoot down Matt's idea of hey, you just came to a solution, this is no good. I was trying to ask more thoughtful questions in our thread of what are we trying to achieve here through these specific metrics? And I could better understand what he was going for, so that when I brought forth a way to revise the proposal, it didn't just feel like I was trying to dominate the conversation, and instead I was looking for input on how to improve to reach a better outcome. Now, with that said, I think it's worthwhile to understand what is your relationship with your product manager and how do they like to receive feedback. Matt's pretty shameless in saying he has short toes is the way he keeps describing it. He loves to have this type of dialogue all the way across our validation and build track. So I felt pretty comfortable approaching an issue that I saw come up as a priority in one of our previous milestones. But if you're trying to figure out what works well for you, I think just continuing to have frequent conversations with product managers and understanding how their dynamics are and how they like to receive feedback is worth considering when you're trying to provide feedback asynchronously.
Excellent. Did anyone else have any questions that they weren't able to type in the agenda?
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Austin.